Yes, as thinking and feeling creatures, there is a virtue in being teachable and being open-minded. The next few videos are going to be my presentation of small nuggets, discrete aspects of what it is to be an attentive, intelligent, reasonable, and responsible thinking being. This is important because I spend a lot of time teaching, and sometimes I teach rational and deductive philosophical topics, and other times I teach revelation, biblical studies, Christian theology, and some of the deep thinking of the Christian West. And in all of that, there's a requirement on the part of the student to learn the art of thinking well in order to absorb these things. And so there's a term we've developed called being open-minded or being teachable. In fact, the Latin term docile actually means to be teachable. And there's a certain attitude for learning that open-mindedness and teachability means. And I want to zero in on exactly what that is, so that you can know exactly what to do when trying to learn or listen to a different viewpoint. When I talk about being open-minded, I'm not saying that we should not have firmly held opinions, firmly held beliefs or feelings. And I'm certainly not suggesting that open-mindedness means some sort of gullibility to just take in whatever is being presented or being looked at. What it is, however, is a virtue, a kind of humility of being open to learn new things, and in the process of learning new things, to discover that you may not have it all right yourself. You may not already know things right. You may have to unlearn some of the things you believe. You may have to admit that you're wrong or that your knowledge is only partial. And as soon as we step into that territory, it can get emotional. Our pride can get hurt, or we might get afraid that certainties that we were sure about may not be so certain. So open-mindedness is both an emotional attitude as well as an actual technique of learning. Now, to help you know exactly what I mean by being teachable, I want to tell you precisely what the goal of being open-minded is. What are we aiming for when we're being teachable? What's the target? The target of open-mindedness is understanding, to come to understand another viewpoint, or understand why someone feels the way they feel, or understand why a new theory might be plausible, or to understand why these data make up valid evidence for some other viewpoint. So open-mindedness is just about understanding another view, and one that might be quite different from your own. Now, the precondition for understanding, the means by which we get to that goal of understanding, is simply this. In fact, it's what you and I were being taught in preschool and in grade 1. And that is, pay attention. Listen, focus, pay attention to what is being presented as data, as evidence, as argument, the narrative, the theory, whatever. Whatever is being presented to you, listen, focus, pay attention. Without that, without an active striving to try to understand, we usually will not gain insight. Now I get what you mean. So you see little kids being taught. It doesn't seem to be spontaneous for them. Their attention is pulled away by distractions that pop up, and you'll see a teacher say, no, focus, pay attention now, listen carefully, because that's the precondition to understanding. And to be teachable, to have an open mind, is to aim at understanding another viewpoint. Now, there's a test to see whether you've understood, and especially when you're in dialogue with a person or listening to a teacher, and that is, can you repeat back to the presenter an interpretation or a version of what they've just said that satisfies them? Can you say to them, do I understand you correctly to be saying this and this and this? And if the presenter says, you've got it, that's exactly what I mean, then your minds have met. and you have understood, you have received, you've gained insight into what that person was trying to communicate through presenting data that you listened to, that you paid attention to, until you understood. Now this gets us to a key point that I want to make, and that is that you need to understand that to understand someone is not to agree with them. To understand a position is not to disagree with it either. Because to agree or to disagree or to evaluate as good or bad, those are judgments that are made after and apart from when you understand something. So one of the greatest blocks for people is that they think that to understand would mean to suddenly also agree. And that if I listened and I paid attention and I got your viewpoint, I'd naturally just fall into agreement with it. And that's not the case. And often people will be hesitant to really listen and really understand because they're protecting judgments they already have, beliefs they already have, and they're not being open-minded. So there's no fear in this. You cannot judge right and wrong. You cannot evaluate as good or bad something that you have not yet understood. And you won't understand if you weren't paying attention, looking, listening, so on. So all I want to say is the target of having an open mind and being teachable is to gain understanding. That should not be threatening, because understanding something is not the same as affirming or disaffirming it. That's a separate stage and a very important stage in critical thinking. So that's the definition of open-mindedness and teachability I wanted to give you today. And in another video, I may talk about the reverse side of that, which is a tendency we have to deliberately avoid understanding and what might be behind that. Thanks.